Musical Truth, Volume 2.
This is my church. God is a DJ.
They call me arrogant, cause I speak when it's a room full of elephants.
Some say man ain't happiness, man truly dies.
Well, maybe we should all be praying for time.
Oh, don't be fooled by what you see. Don't be fooled by what you hear.
Man, you've been a naughty boy, you let your face grow long.
Then I get on my knees and pray we don't get fooled again.
Musical Truth Volume 2 by Mark Devlin is available now on Amazon and via musicaltruthbook.com.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated? Good night.
Good vibrations.
Alright, so welcome back to the Good Vibrations podcast. Regular listeners will be aware that it's been a minute since the last episode, and there's not been many during 2018. This is entirely down to the huge workload that I've had elsewhere this year. I've done a whole bunch of interviews to promote my new book, Musical Truth Volume 2, on various radio shows and podcasts over the months. I've done about 25 of these, and most of them have been about 2 hours long. And let me tell you, it's very mentally and emotionally taxing and wearing to stay on point for that length of time and try and come with incisive and truthful and empowering information. So that's certainly a huge workload in itself, which has detracted me from a lot of other things. I've also been travelling and touring, doing live presentations based around material in the book. That's also taken a lot of time. And on top of that, not to bore people with my personal details, but I've got a day job, I've got a family, I've got a weekly music radio show that I do. I still do the occasional DJ gig, so it all really impacts on the availability of my time. However, that being said, I do intend to pull right back on the amount of other interviews that I'm doing now because, to be honest, I feel a bit burnt out from doing it all. And I need a bit of a break to regroup. What that means is I'm going to be able to put a lot more time into my own podcast, Good Vibrations. I really want to step this up and get some guests on and let them do the talking, let them present their information. So I've got plans to put out quite a few episodes starting from autumn 2018, or fall, as my American friends would put it. No pun intended with today's subject matter in mind. So that's the update on the situation. There will be more episodes on the way. I hope people will continue to check it out. Of course, the main portal for Good Vibrations is my Spreaker page. You can also access it via the main website, which is markdevlin.co.uk. All my podcasts get put up on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/markdevlintv, and you can also subscribe to the RSS feed via iTunes, so you can get all my podcast output material, including The Sound of Freedom, via iTunes. Just look for me and the name of the shows there. Alright, so on to today's comeback show then, and it's another conversation with a good friend of mine and a very impeccable researcher, very respected, Mike Williams, aka the Sage of Quay. I'm going to be talking about the McCartney conspiracy, as I refer to it as. It is Paul McCartney material, but don't worry, we're not trotting out once again the official Paul is dead narrative and going through all those clues and stuff like that. That's been done many times before on many other shows. This is an updated revisiting to the whole McCartney situation from a more informed and advanced perspective, I would say. So this is advanced level material, not entry level. It's primarily for people that have some knowledge already of this subject area, and we're looking at it from strictly an updated 2018 perspective with some very topical insights into things that are going on and are likely to be going on. Welcome back to Good Vibrations to the Sage of Quay himself, Mike Williams. All right, mate?
Hey, Mark, how are you? Happy to be back.
Yep, I'm not too bad. And of course, you are, by default, Mr. PID when it comes to McCartney research, the go-to guy for all matters connected with Paul McCartney, which was never really part of your plan. But it's funny how life works out sometimes, right?
Yeah, that was never my plan. In fact, I think in the first show you and I did, I made the statement that I wasn't going to do any more Paul is Dead interviews.
You did.
I did, right? Because I didn't want to become the Paul is Dead guy.
Yep.
But I think I'm the Paul is Dead guy. So
right, you got your epitaph sorted. Mike Williams, he was the Paul is Dead guy. Really, I refer to this as a McCartney podcast. And this whole area of research now I just refer to as McCartney business, because I've stopped using PID, Paul is Dead. Yeah. Because, first of all, there's actually no documentary evidence that Paul ever did die. It's a myth, it's a legend. There's a world of clues and symbolic little pointers to suggest this is what happened, but there's actually no evidence. And as truth-seeking researchers, we are the sort of people that, like to go with evidence. And the other thing about it is, I think the phrase PID has taken on a bit of a stigma. It's kind of like flat earth and Illuminati. It's a button pusher. People hear the phrase, and it tends to generate emotional reactions in certain people. So because of that, I don't refer to it as PID anymore, but it's McCartney research, basically.
Yeah, I refer to it as the McCartney conspiracy, because I tried to move away from PID also, because you're right, it is a phrase that is in line with like chemtrails and flat earth and stuff like that, where as soon as you say it, people automatically roll their eyes and go into debunking mode. So it really is a McCartney conspiracy, because there's a lot more to it than the replacement, because he was replaced. There's no question in my mind he was replaced. And I do agree, Mark, that we have no hard evidence that he actually died, although I tend to lean in that direction because I believe it's a lot easier for Tavistock and those that are controlling and handling this situation to match it better with the actual biological Paul not being in the picture. But that's just a theory I have. So you're right. We have no proof that he actually died.
Right. And to kick the podcast off, I just want to mention that I personally feel like I've really lost my way with this whole McCartney business. I've said this to you on a couple of occasions in private correspondence between us. I've kind of lost the plot, because you and I did the show together in late 2016. It was after the one you did with Sophia Smallstorm, which was a real game changer, and that really got a lot of people onto this path. And you and I did a follow-up show shortly afterwards where we just laid out the whole narrative of the memoirs of Billy Shears, the book, which we'll get into, and all these different clues and stuff. And I was very much sold on that for quite some time. But I've allowed myself to go into different areas of this whole conspiracy, and what I've seen is that there appear to be at least two Pauls going all the way back to the very early days. So we're talking late 1950s onwards throughout. It's not a simple case of original Paul disappearing off the scene in 1966 and this imposter taking his place. I think the one thing we can certainly agree on is that there's been more than one Paul McCartney. I think that's a very accurate statement. But beyond that, I've very much lost my way. And one of the things that confuses me is if you do a Google image search for young Paul McCartney, you get some pictures where this young guy looks more like the present day McCartney that we have than he does that chubby-faced, cute one that we all think of as real Paul. And this chubby-faced individual seems to have been on the scene from the early to the mid-60s, but you don't really see much of him after the mid-60s. What we seem to have is two main players, and one of them seems to have a more pointed, beaky kind of nose than the other one. And in certain other pictures, you'll see Paul McCartney in inverted commas with a flatter, more spread out nose. So I think there's some clues there in the way the noses look. This one particular picture, which has really got me flummoxed, people can look it up for themselves. If you type in beautiful young Paul McCartney in a Google image search, you get this one particular image which comes up on Pinterest. And it's a very young Paul. It's supposed to have been taken in 1960. So if that's biological Paul, who was born in 1942, then he's only 17 or 18 years old in that picture. The other thing about it is in 1960, Paul was not yet famous because the Beatles had not yet broken through. And yet this is a professional photo shoot. You can see that it is, which is credited to the year 1960. And looking at this young chap in this photo, he just looks to me like the Paul that we have today, far more so than chubby-faced Paul. So, would you like to address those observations first off? Because I'm sure it's something you've looked at yourself.
Yeah, it is something I've looked at, Mark. And so when I first started this, I looked at it very binary. There was one biological Paul McCartney from, and I'll pick the period of time for when they had a record contract with EMI. So 1963 through 1966. And then in 1967, there is a primary imposter or replacement and I'll refer to him as Bill Shepard because that's the name that's given to us in memoirs. If folks want to refer to him as Billy Campbell or Billy Shears, that's fine. I'm not really that interested in the surname. And so there was a primary actor replaced biological Paul starting in late 1966 with others paging in and out from that point going forward. In fact, maybe even into today. So I don't discount that. But I agree that we have these set of pictures where there appears to be these anomalies in the way he looks. And the facial features do, in some cases, look like the Paul after 1967, post the Sergeant Pepper on, post that period.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a couple of conclusions or theories, I should say, that I've come to. One is that a lot of time has passed since the primary biological Paul, and I'll get to the primary biological Paul piece in a second, was replaced. 52 years have gone by. And so what I believe is possible, what has happened is the people that are running this psy-op have been able to go back and doctor pictures, plain and simple. That, you know, we cannot discount that. We can't put it past them.
And video footage too.
And video footage too. Yep, and video footage too. I believe, as an example, one example that comes to mind is the Help movie. So I have looked at this, and I can see it, and others have called it out, that if you have a copy of the old Help video, maybe going back to VHS, and then you take a look at Help released later on DVD, there are subtle differences in how Paul appears. VHS versus the DVD version of the film. What happened? So I believe what happened was they went in, and of course with the technology they have today, they were able to doctor the person, Paul McCartney, in the film and make subtle changes. They don't make them glaring because they don't want it to be very obvious, but they'll tweak little things here and little things there so that when you go and take a look at it, it causes a lot of confusion.
Right.
Right? So I've bumped up against this too. And so what I believe, Mark, is that in the beginning there was a primary biological Paul. But we have to remember back in the days, especially when they were introduced on the Ed Sullivan Show, the Beatles were referred to as an act, an ACT, an act. So I have come to the conclusion that there have always been doubles and lookalikes that were in play. Although there was a primary biological Paul, there was a primary biological John Lennon, and so on, that they were the main players. And in the early days, virtually most of the time, that's who we were seeing. But there were other times, and I believe it to be a small slice of the pie, where we were not seeing them, maybe in magazines, some kind of TV footage, cameos, that type of thing. There were a substitute, a lookalike, a double was used instead. And the reason why I believe that is very possible and plausible is because the Beatles were and still are a huge investment by British intelligence and Tavistock, and there was absolutely no way they were going to do this without having a backup plan and having backup players. There was no way they were going to allow that to happen. right? So they had to have the ability in order to have backfill and swap out where they needed. So that's what I think has been going on. And again, the pictures, 52 years of this since Billy replaced biological Paul, and in those 52 years, I think a lot of adjusting and tweaking has been taking place. That's my personal belief.
Yeah. I've started to see the role of Paul McCartney as being like that of James Bond. So you've had all these different actors playing the character of James Bond, from Sean Connery to Roger Moore to Daniel Craig, and then you have stuntmen as well. So you have the main actors, but when you see this crazy stunt in a Bond movie, that's obviously a stuntman. So you've got all these people paging in and out as James Bond, and it's starting to look like Paul McCartney is some kind of character like that.
I absolutely agree. And that, I think, Mark, you're spot on. And that's where it has landed. And the other analogy I use when I try to explain this, these other players, is it's not very different than when you go to work and then you take 2 weeks of vacation or holiday. In that 2-week period when you're not there, does your work stop? No, it doesn't stop. What happens is they have somebody else do the processing or whatever it is that your job is, so that the work continues. There's no break in continuity. And any business or corporation is going to do that. So I believe that the same approach is applied to Paul McCartney. And I agree. He has become, unfortunately, to a lot of people who are following this, because I used to be in that boat. I mean, Paul McCartney was Paul McCartney, great songwriter and all this, and you believed it was one guy and he evolved over time and he was all this and all that. And now you're looking at it and saying, yeah, he's a character.
Yeah.
You know, it's a character that people are playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So looking again at these two individuals that seem to have been playing the role for the most part, and I think there are probably others. I think we agree that there have been the odd stand-in that's turned up for
absolutely
a press conference here, a photo shoot there, you know. But there seem to be two main characters, and I mentioned there's a difference in the noses. So if you do a Google image search for Paul McCartney, you're going to see some of the time an individual with a pointed beaky nose, which seems to be the one we have today. The present day one has that beaky nose, and then the other one has a flatter kind of nose. But there's also a difference in the eye colour. So the beaky hook-nosed one seems to have greener eyes, and the straight-nosed one seems to have brown eyes. And the crazy situation with that picture that I mentioned, which dates back to 1960, where this young guy looks like present-day Paul, in inverted commas. Now, if the Billy memoirs narrative is accurate, then back in 1960, the individual playing Paul today, Billy, would have looked nothing like Paul and would have had no reason to, particularly if he was in these other bands like Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots and the Diplomats, and then he was playing Vivian Stanshall later, but that involved makeup. So you would have expected him to have looked nothing like him. So this one particular photo really has me flummoxed. But there are others from that era as well, late 50s, early 60s. Now, the idea that there are two Paul McCartneys, two main guys, is not entirely incompatible with the memoirs narrative, because Billy could well have been the full-time actor, as the book claims, with either real Paul or another actor being the other one that we see all the time. Hope everyone's following. This gets very convoluted. So, you know, there's some crossover there between what Memoirs is putting forward and what we actually see, which is there's two Pauls the whole time. But there's another very tantalising theory that's been put forward by Miles Mathis, one researcher, and many others, which is that Paul, secretly, is one of twins, fraternal twins. That would explain why the two characters look so like each other. That would explain how they got away with it, because it would have been a military intelligence operation, and we know that the likes of MI6 and the CIA and stuff like doing experiments with twins. So can you just dive into that one, the whole idea that Paul could have been one of twins? I know it's come across your radar before, so what's your viewpoint on this? Again,
I don't discount anything, Mark, because when we talk about who's involved and behind this, we're talking about very, very powerful people and very powerful entities. We start talking about British intelligence, we start talking about Tavistock and the Freemasonry, the Illuminati. You, I think, would be foolish, not you personally, but we would be foolish to discount the twin theory. Now, I haven't focused a lot on it. I have heard it. People have asked me about it. And my answer is, of course, anything is possible. It is possible. Because we can't assume that they have told us the truth, because we know, just based upon the fact that at a very high level, that biological Paul, the guy from 63 to 66, is not the guy today. That's not truthful.
Now, if there's any foundation to the idea that Paul could have been one of twins, it means the memoirs narrative is bullshit, because there's no mention of it in there. So if you embrace the suggestion that there were twins, then you've got to throw out memoirs, because then it's just disinfo and it's leading you up the garden path. So how do we reconcile these two aspects?
Well, I wouldn't discount it. I would say that if the twin theory is true, and again, if it's true, that's the thing. So I would say that Bill just left it out. I don't know. I mean, maybe he left it out because it would have been something that he couldn't talk about, with regard to his non-disclosures and his confidentiality agreements. So, I mean, we can make that argument. I could make that argument that because in memoirs, he does state in one of the chapters that he wanted to talk more about his family tree and his descendants. And in memoirs, if I recall, it's been a while now since I've read it, but there was one chapter which included a letter from his attorney that he put in the book where his attorney said, don't go there, don't do that. So he was not able to dive into his own family tree. And so perhaps, well, maybe not even perhaps, but having a twin brother is being part of the family tree is something that he couldn't talk about. You know, I could make that argument. But again, this is all predicated on the fact that the twin theory is valid. And to be honest with you, I've read a lot of Miles Mathis's stuff over time, and I'm going to give you my personal view. It makes for interesting reading, and I think it's entertaining. He also, if I'm not mistaken, believes that Mark Stacer is John Lennon.
He does, yeah.
Right, and I absolutely do not see that or agree with it. No, because first of all, Mark Stacer is up in Canada. He has a website. His website promotes his John Lennon impersonating, and he does parties and events as John Lennon and so on. And in fact, if you listen to Mark Stacer on YouTube, and he has lots of videos up there, there are many times when he does a spot-on, impeccable version of John Lennon, the voice, the whole 9 yards. And there are other times when I heard Mark sing, and he's off. I'm not saying he's off as far as singing in key. What I'm saying is the vocal intonation and the sounding like of John Lennon is not there. He falls in and out of character, if you will. So, yeah, so I don't know. So to kind of sum it up, the twin theory, I've heard it. I've been asked about it. I can consider it. I don't toss it out, but I don't put a lot of stock in it. I'll just leave it there, I guess.
Well, I can see you've considered all these different options. You've obviously given it some thought at some point, so that's good that you're not just throwing it out automatically. But anyway, the twin idea, I know that in the 1940s, from information that I've seen, a lot of twins that were born, particularly those out of wedlock that went into adoption homes and the care system and things like that, were apparently separated. There used to be this strategy in Britain whereby they would split up twins and give them out to couples that wanted to adopt or foster, so that they were fairly distributed as they saw it. They wouldn't put two twins together in the same family, so they would be separated. They would go out at birth, and then there's the possibility that they could be reunited later in life, but of course they might not. But that's something worth considering as well, that maybe if we're looking at twins, they were separated at birth and then later in life came together in some way. But that's by no means me stating that's what happened, because I'm as confused as anyone in all this. In fact, the more I dig into this McCartney research, the more confused I become. And you might think the opposite would be the case, that the more hours you spend on researching it, the more crystal clear the whole thing becomes. But it just gets murkier and murkier for me. and I'm just being honest about that, I'm very far from having all the answers. This is a real mindfuck. Got to hand it to them. They've done a proper psy-op with this one.
Yeah, this is really unbelievable. It really is. And I just try to boil it down to its very basic elements, Mark, because it is very easy to look at those pictures and say, what the hell is going on here? Am I going nuts? And of course, that's part of the psy-op, is for you to go look at pictures or for people to go do research and take a look at the pictures and to get very frustrated with it.
Well, particularly if they've been doctoring old pictures and old video footage, as you suggested earlier. If they've been doing that, then what chance do any of us stand really in getting to the bottom of this whole thing?
Well, think about it. 50 years that Bill has been the primary player. 50 years is a long time for them to be able to go back and to doctor information. Now, the internet is not 50 years old, so they've had a nice piece of runway in which they were able to go and to disseminate photos and images, and I'll call them images because a photo is different than an image, where by the time the internet caught up, all of that stuff was out there. All these pictures were out there that would be very confusing once somebody dove in and tried to figure out what was going on. So my approach to it was this. There is what I believe is the primary biological Paul, and that's the one I focus on. And that's the Paul that I have in my collage that I know you've seen and many others have seen. I've had him in the shows and so on. I've put them up on Facebook. And then we have this primary version of Paul McCartney, which is played by Bill, and he's very different. So that's where I try to stay, because if I start trying to look left and look right, what happens is exactly what you just explained. We get ourselves jammed up because we start to question ourselves and we start to doubt. But in reality, the way I frame it is that's exactly what they want us to do. They want us to drift left. They want us to drift right because they want to create that confusion and that self-doubt.
And there's arguments within the PID camp. You know, you have certain people that stick to the official narrative no matter what, the myth, the legend. Then you have others that are a bit more open-minded and go all these different places, and they argue amongst themselves. You're right, you're wrong, I'm right, you know. So it's more divide and conquer even within this area of research.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've received emails from other McCartney conspiracy researchers, and they disagree with me. Oh, Mike, you're wrong on that. You're wrong on this. And my response is, look, right and wrong with regard to this is extremely subjective because nobody has any hard evidence of anything. All we can do is go by the, what we're able to dig up and put a theory forth and piece it together. That's all we can do. That's all we can do. So, as an example, one researcher wrote me and said they were all killed and they were all swapped out. Well, my response back to that is that's a pretty huge claim.
How would you ever prove that?
How could you prove that? So, you need to prove it. You need to put forth the facts and the evidence that says conclusively that indeed happened. It could have happened, but it's not. It hasn't been proven. It's a theory that somebody has. And that's the thing. These PID researchers have to understand what you have is a theory. I have never claimed, nor you, that we have this thing nailed and this is the way it is. This is the way it went down. It's a theory. I can give you a theory as to how the whole thing rolled out. And I think my theory makes sense. But I'm not saying that I got it 100% right. And nobody can make that claim. Right. No one. Yeah.
Well, maybe Ringo, but I don't think we can expect him to be spilling the beans in an interview candidly anytime soon. Nor Heather, for that matter.
No, he just got knighted. He's part of the club.
Yeah, so he'll be keeping his mouth shut now.
Yeah.
But really, the individuals who would have been present in 1966 and prior who might be able to actually tell us what happened, how many of them are left?
Virtually none.
Almost all gone. I mean, if you take the view that present-day Paul isn't really Paul, then all you've got is Ringo, Yoko, May Pang, and not a whole lot of others.
Yeah, and they're not going to say anything. they're all part of the scheme, if you will.
Oh, Pete Best. Pete Best is still alive, but he seems to have been left out of this whole party. I think your theory is that Pete Best was not a Freemason, whereas the other Beatles probably were.
Yep, I believe that we were given an entire bogus story about Pete Best. He wasn't that good a drummer. He was a drinker. He was unreliable because of his drinking and all that stuff. I don't believe that to be the reason. I'm not saying that Pete didn't drink. I mean, Ringo drank. I mean, they all drank. I believe it's because Pete was not a Freemason, and when it was time to throw the switch and say, yeah, those are the guys, that's who we're going to push forward, that's who's going to be the primary band in this program of social engineering, it's going to be the Beatles. They swapped them out. Goodbye, Pete, so sorry, and then they installed Ringo into the equation. Now, and we know Ringo's part of the club, like we just mentioned. Ringo just got knighted.
That's right.
Right.
I want to say hi to Tom and Billy if they're listening. I meant to do that at the start. Hi, guys. I know you do listen to these shows, so welcome along. Welcome to Ringo, too, if he's listening. You never know. Just as an aside, you posted something to do with Stuart Sutcliffe the other day, which was a picture of him from 1961, was it, or 62, where he's sitting in a chair and he's making what appears to be a Freemasonic hand sign as he's sitting there. Now, this is a very strange business because he died in 1962 at the ridiculously young age of 21. And the story is he had got into a fight with John Lennon, and shortly after this, Stuart Sutcliffe developed a brain aneurysm, which killed him fairly quickly. And I think it was Stu Sutcliffe's sister, Pauline, who in a book claimed that it was the fight with Lennon that had caused the brain aneurysm. There's also a rumour that John Lennon and Stuart Sutcliffe were having a homosexual affair. Right. I don't know how much you've dug into all of that with regards to Stuart Sutcliffe.
Well, what I know about Stu is the reading that I did about the Beatles years ago, and he and Astrid, she was the photographer, and just being really good and very good friends and close friends with the Beatles and so on. And but I believe that now, especially since I found these pictures of Stuart making Illuminati hand signs, hand gestures, that just lends credence to the fact that the whole secret society piece of this was in play a very, very long time ago. And this is something that I have said from the very beginning, that I believe that when I talked about the McCartney clan, especially his father, Jim McCartney, that he was a Freemason, because I did not believe there was any way this whole thing can go down without his father playing a major part in this. So when we take a look at Stuart in his hand sign, sitting in the chair, I'm one person on my Facebook page. I love him to death, but they say, well, Mike, maybe he just sat that way. Maybe that's just how he sits. And I'm like, no, that's not a normal way to. Yeah, that's not a normal way to sit. So he was clearly being staged to be photographed that way, making the upside down triangle pyramid. So what I conclude from that, Mark, is that as far as I'm concerned, that's just another nugget that we can put into the research here that shows that the Freemasonic roots, it goes way, way back, because there are folks that believe, and there are researchers that believe, that the Beatles were organic up until the point that Bill came in, and then they were controlled. So in other words, they weren't controlled prior to Bill showing up. They were controlled after Bill showing up. And what's happening now is, I believe there's an avalanche of evidence, if you just go back and take a look, that proves that theory to be completely wrong. That the Beatles were always on the radar. They were always in that pool of resource that Tavistock was looking at to see what they can do, how they can nurture these bands, how they can bring them about. And the Beatles happened to be at the top of the pecking order.
Yeah.
But there were many other bands below that. You had The Who. I mean, you had Keith Moon had the all-seeing eye tattooed around his left nipple. I mean, give me a break.
Just a coincidence. Nothing to worry about.
Just a coincidence, right. And then and we know Denny Lane is part of this whole thing, and Led Zeppelin, and we can go on and on and on. Donovan knew. You and I know about this. We've talked about this before. The Stones knew. The Stones for sure were a Tavistock
Elton John
project.
found out.
Yeah, I mean, so people have to get their heads wrapped around the fact that it's all controlled. That's really it at the end of the day. You have to stop believing that you have organic anything in the music and the entertainment business in particular. None of it is organic.
I certainly don't buy that they started out organic. You know, the idea then is that they were this entirely natural, random grassroots band that wrote all these nice love songs like She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand. And then at a certain point, they became corrupted and certain elements infiltrated the band. And then they went off down that psychedelic route and started putting out all this experimental stuff, which resulted in Sgt. Pepper, and which seems a pretty naive viewpoint as far as I'm concerned. You know, they're writing all these love songs, then they just decide to do this switch, or they're coerced to do this switch. I think right from the start, it was planned that they would spend a few years building the fan base, winning them over with these nice, catchy, accessible love songs that the whole family could enjoy, that get some airplay on Ed Sullivan, wins them over an American audience. But it would always have been in the plan that at a key point, which appears to have been 1966, they do the big switch and they go off down this route, which was always on the books. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's how it went down. Absolutely. And think about it, and it's all the numbers and the numerology that's involved in it. We know that through memoirs, the number 6, 66, 666, the 9s. I mean, this is all in play. And numerology in the occult is, that's how it works. Numbers are very, very important.
That's right.
So, and that's another thing that we see playing through ever since the Beatles came into play. And I try to stress this to with folks that are into the research and listening. As an example, their first album, Please Please Me, released on the Parlophone label, which is part of EMI, was part of EMI. The album was released on March 22nd, 3/22. Pepper was released on June 1st. 6 times 1 is 6. You know, so we have to get, people have to get their heads wrapped around the whole, the occult aspect of this. You know, and that's the other thing that people struggle with because they don't understand the occult. But this whole thing is occulted. It's all Masonic. It's all controlled by Tavistock and so on. You have to get your heads wrapped around that.
It doesn't matter if you yourself, anyone listening to this, doesn't believe in the occult, doesn't put any stock in numerology. They do. That's the important point. And actually, if you don't put any stock in it and you think it's all BS, that only aids them. That's only serving as an advantage to them because they're slipping all this stuff under the radar then and not being called out on it. So, you know, it's a thing whether any one individual chooses to recognise that or not. Let me ask you about the candidate that we have for the main role, you know, Billy Shepherd, this guy, is supposed to have been in the group Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots in the early 60s. Have you ever come across what purports to be a photograph of Billy Pepper from that group? Because I had a look earlier today and I couldn't find one. I don't know if there's any in existence.
It's very, very sketchy. So the only thing you get is on the album covers, you will see this band purported to be Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots. Here's the problem. You don't know if those are the guys that are actually in the band or if these are actors that showed up for a photo shoot. That's the problem you have. So I'm going to say that I haven't seen what I consider to be a valid picture of Billy Pepper from Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots. I looked at the album covers. If you look at them, you could see that the silhouettes, the way it's photographed, it's very dark. It's hard to make out facial features and stuff like that. And again, even if I think that I see a Phil Ackrell type of facial feature there, I have to fall back on, but Mike, there's nothing that validates that that's the actual band that played on the album. You know, so it's very, very elusive, Mark. So I don't think I have a good answer for you on that one.
Yeah, fall back, no pun intended. Now, this guy, Billy Shepherd, also seems to have cropped up as the author of a book that came out in 1964. And it was, I forget the title of it, but it purported to be, Life on the Road with the Beatles. It was this guy talking about what it's like to go around all these gigs with the Beatles. And right there on the cover, you get it credited to Bill Shepherd, or Billy Shepherd, I think it is. Right. So that appears to be another little indicator that that's our man showing up there in 1964.
Yes, and what it also shows is that he was involved in the Beatle arena before he was tapped to come in and replace biological Paul. So that's something else that has fallen into place here, that he's been around a while, or at least they want us to believe that he's been around a while, because we don't know if that was actually him that wrote that article, or the people behind the psy-op decided that they were just going to place his name on the article. And of course, there was a ghostwriter, right? And I know there's a lot of open switches here, folks. So if you're thinking like, there doesn't seem to be a lot of solid ground to stand on with this, you're right. Yeah.
Well, if anyone could do a better job of providing primary evidence to prove the case one way or the other, get in touch.
Exactly. Please step forward.
Because we're doing our best with it here.
Yeah. So I think that it's possible that they floated his name out there. I don't think he actually sat down and wrote I doubt that, wrote the article. But I believe it's possible that those that were running the psy-op, they just started dropping the hints. So that later on down the road, when a book like Memoirs comes out, you're going to see the name William Shepherd, Billy Shepherd, and now you're going to look back and you're going to say, okay, well, let's see where I can find him in the timeline going back in history. And of course, boom, you see that magazine or that article that was written, right? You see Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots, and you buy the album and you can see that his name is part of the song credits for the songs that he wrote.
Bill Shepherd, right, on the record label.
Yes, yep. It says Bill Shepherd, for the songs that he wrote. And, of course, he did a lot of Beatle covers. That's interesting, too, right? Those Mercy Beat albums that he was doing as Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots, half the album were Beatles songs. And the other half were original compositions that he and another fellow that he worked with, allegedly, this is what he says in Memoirs, those are songs that he wrote. So the whole thing's very weird, And then you've got him back claiming that he was Phil Ackrell, and I do believe he played the part of Phil Ackrell. And who was he teamed with? Denny Lane. And then, Denny Lane comes back into the picture when he leaves the Beatles and he forms Wings. So, the whole thing is just one big happy family, if you ask me.
We must get Denny Lane pissed more often. He gets a bit loose-lipped. I'm going to buy that man about 5 pints if I ever see him. On to the Memoirs version of events then, and what can be gleaned from the Hugh Harriet books. And for the benefit of anyone hearing this that's not familiar with the books, I'm sure most people are, but the main book, The Memoirs of Billy Shears, came out on the 9th of September 2009, so it's 999. We're going to get into some numbers. There are different variations of the book as well. It's credited to an author or an encoder by the name of Thomas E. Hugh Harriet, and it purports to be the autobiography of the individual that's been playing the part of Paul McCartney since 1966, who names himself as William Shepherd, Billy. It's described as a work of historical fiction to get round all kinds of legal problems, so we as readers are left not knowing which parts are spilling the beans and telling the truth and which parts are pure fiction that's been embellished. Certainly there's the tenet of placing the truth in plain sight and revelation of the method, which I've talked about many times. The occult secret societies that run the show, that have the entertainment industry in their grip and all these other different facets of life, do seem to abide by this tenet of letting us know what they're doing. So it's tantalising to think that this book could actually be, to a very large extent, the truth of what happened. But again, we are left not knowing which parts might be truthful and which parts might be completely made up. But the reason we wanted to get a show out by a certain time right now is because of the numerology involved and the fact that we're edging closer to a date that is all about the nines. So that's the 9th of September 2018. On the last big 999 date, oh, and by the way, if you chop off the 20 of 2018, you're left with the 1 and the 8. So there you get 3 9s, 999. On the last big 999 date in 2009, we had EMI issuing the entire Beatles back catalogue on CD. And they also released a music video game on that date called The Beatles Rock Band. So it's led you to suspect that we might be due for some sort of revelation on the 9th of September this year. And we wanted to get this show out in time for it. What is your best guess as to what we might expect in just a few days' time?
Well, they're a little behind on some stuff, so let me just start with that. But let me back up a second, Mark, and let me just say this. Going back a few months ago, I had said that what we were going to get September 9th of 2018, he was going to release a new album. And this was before anybody knew he was going to release a new album. And I said this on Facebook, and unfortunately, I don't think I was able to get it out on a show, but I did have it out on Facebook. So I have, my friends there, yourself, and others who follow this know that I had come out with that. And I'll explain how I knew this. Also, I was told that he was going to announce a tour that was going to correlate with the release of his new album. And indeed, he did do that. And I knew about the tour, before he announced the tour, or anybody knew that he was going to announce a tour. So the way I came across this information is that there are folks within Bill's organization that have reached out to me. And I want to say this because, Mark, I get emails about this all the time. I have nothing to do with memoirs. I'm not compensated by it. There are no perks. There's nothing.
You never wanted to be that guy.
I never wanted to be that guy. But what's happened is I've put the shows out. They enjoy the fact that the shows are going out because there is a process of disclosure that's taking place. And there are groups within Bill's organization that are working on various projects that will, over time, disclose. I was told that full disclosure won't take place until after he passes away. So let me just go back. So one of the contacts, focal points within his organization, contacted me and said that I'm going back to maybe the May time frame. I don't remember the exact time frame, but it was a few months before September, and told me that the album was going to be released and that a tour was going to be announced. And I went on Facebook and I said, a CD is going to be released and a tour is going to be announced. And I said that the album will be released on September 9th, 2018. So Bill releases the album, but he releases it on September 7th, 2018. So I've had people write me and say, Mike, you missed it by 2 days. And I said, well, yes and no.
Is this Egypt Station?
Yes, Egypt Station, which is completely loaded up with occulted symbolism on the front cover. In fact,
sure is.
I sent an email to Michael Joseph, because you and I both know Michael. He's a good friend of ours. And I said, Michael, here's his cover. I said, I can pick out things because I've done enough research to pick out, the occulted pieces of it. I said, but you, being an expert in the occult, will be able to not only point it out, but tell us what it means. So Michael has agreed, once his schedule frees up, it's going to be after September 9th, to do a show to take the audience through what that album represents from an occulted perspective. So we're going to have that covered. So if anybody is wondering about that, we will decode Bill's his new album.
Let me just ask, though, I was under the impression that Egypt Station was released early August. It's already out.
It was, his official release date was, you can pre-order it in August, I believe, because I pre-ordered it. But the official release date was September 7th, 2018. That's when people wrote me and said, hey, Mike, you missed it by 2 days. And I said yes and no.
So it's not on the streets yet?
It's not on the streets yet.
Okay.
No, I mean he's got it released. I guess you can you can hear previews of it if you go on Amazon. I think he has a song or two that he's released on the social media platforms like YouTube. But the entire album itself is not going to be officially released until September 7th. So September 7th, 2018 is 999. So you have September, not the 9th month. You have the 7. And when you add that to the 2 in 2018, 7 plus 2 is 9. And then you have the last two digits of the year, 1 and 8. 1 plus 8 is 9. So it's 999.
It's another way of getting there.
It's out right. So what it's called regrouping the numbers. That's what they do. They regroup the numbers. And I actually another thing that we're going to see, what we were supposed to see happening was a consolidation of his websites. And I was told that his websites would be consolidated, and they were shooting for 9.9. And then I was told that the website design, the guys doing the work, they fell a little bit behind. So the consolidation of his websites, he has like jpaulmccartney.com. That's going to be the new website, by the way, www.jpaulmccartney.com. And he has another website called paulmccartney.com, and he has another website called sirpaulmccartney.com. All of this stuff's going to be consolidated, so it essentially will point to one website. That was supposed to happen on September 9th, but it appears that's going to be delayed. But the point being is, even though it's delayed, I'm telling you that there's going to be a consolidation of websites. So that's another validation, a proof point that people can see that the information that I'm getting, that I'm receiving, they're giving me good information. So we're going to see that. We're going to have, there's going to be, I don't know what it's going to be as far, by the way, also this September 9th is going to be a revision of memoirs. And we could talk about that a little bit, Mark, maybe, when we get a chance, because I was asked for my input as to what else should be included in memoirs to be able to speed up disclosure. It appears that they're looking to step up the rate and pace of making people aware that biological Paul was replaced. So if Tom is, if he's chugging along here on his project plan and he's on time, we should see a new revision of memoirs on 9/9/2018. So that piece of it, memoirs being updated, that came to me from Tom. Tom emailed me directly about that, and he asked me for some of my input. But we're going to see more disclosure on September 9th of 2020. That's a key date. These are key dates. I'm not going to say that there's not going to be stuff in between. I'm talking about key dates. And there's also going to be even far more disclosure on September 9th of 2027. Because on September 9th, 2027, that's 999, again, because you have the 27 at the end of 2027. Also, that is also Bill's birthday. Bill's birthday, I have deducted, is September 9th, 1937. That's when Bill was born. And that's why we have the 999s, because Bill's releasing stuff on his birthday. And on September 9th, 2027, he will be 90 years old. So we have the number 9 again.
Right.
Okay? So I even sent an email to Tom, and I asked him if I was right about his birthday, and I didn't get a response back. So this is how it typically works, okay? So, and let me say this before, I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way. Tom has been very gracious, and I say this in all the shows. He has answered a lot of questions that I have asked him, and but there are certain things that Tom cannot answer. So when Tom can't answer something, typically what happens is there's no response. He won't write back and say, I can't answer that, Mike. He will, when he can answer something, he gives me an answer. When he can't answer something, it just basically goes unanswered. So when I asked him about Bill's birthday, there was no answer. So I'm convinced that it's his birthday. Also, when I had Nick Shylock on the show, Nick, very bright kid, 16 years old. Many of you who are listening to this have probably heard that show. The song Birthday that Bill wrote when he was with the Beatles for the White Album, that song was finished up on September 18th of 1968. So, of course, September 18th of 1 and 8 is 9. So we're back to the 9s again. So probably what happened there was with Birthday, the song Birthday, in all likelihood, he was shooting for September 9th. But I'm a songwriter, so what happens sometimes is you get behind. You have to make a change. You want to change a track, whatever it may be. And so there's a delay. And so what Bill did was he picked the next date in which he can get a 9 out of, and he selected 9/18 for the song Birthday. So I think that that's a very strong clue. So I believe September 9th to be his birthday, and that's why we're seeing all this 999 stuff.
Right. You know, I checked for 9/9/90, so September 9th, 1990, to see if there was anything significant in Paul McCartney's life. Couldn't find a damn thing. But I thought, you know, if this 9s theory is correct, shouldn't there have been something significant on the 9th of the 9th, 90? But I've completely drawn a blank on that, just as a matter of interest.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly, I haven't checked that, so I haven't gone through all the dates.
Apparently, McCartney was on tour in 1990, but it ended late July. So, according to, you know, Wikipedia, he was just kicking his heels in September and doing nothing in particular.
Yeah, okay, so I don't know, we should look at even September 9th of 1999.
Well,
that would be something that we should probably take a look at, too.
Yeah.
Now, full disclosure, so everybody knows, I'm being told, is not going to happen until he passes away. So we will get more and more disclosure, and they do want to awaken people to the fact that, you know, Bill's been in place.
We've got to keep ourselves alive. We've got to keep ourselves alive for that date.
Yeah,
you know, we can't exit this life without being around for that revelation.
Yeah. Well, I received an email from Tom, and he had said to me that you mentioned before the people that were behind all of this. We're talking about the real people behind this, not the players like the Yoko Onos and stuff like that, the May Pangs, but the people that were actually pushing the buttons and the strings, right? They're all dead. They're all dead. So all the people that were behind creating this entire Tavistock project and this psychological operation, they're not here anymore.
Yep.
But of course, there are those that have carried on the quote unquote the legacy of managing this thing. But the original players have all passed.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that someone from the McCartney camp reached out to you with some information about forthcoming revelations. Are you referring to Tom, or is this somebody else?
I can't go into great detail because I cannot disclose the sources, and I don't want to shut off any of these sources.
Right.
I will say that it's both.
Okay.
Okay, that's all I could say. I'm sorry, Mark. Mark is such a good friend, folks. I wish
I know.
I'll tell you off air, maybe, but I can't do it here because I promised that I couldn't disclose certain things, or I wouldn't.
Well, you put me on to an email that you had received from a very high-profile producer on the British music scene.
Yes.
That's all I'm going to say. And this individual had been starting to show an interest in the work that you and I had put out. And you tipped me off, and I've since been in contact with this individual. I've been to see him. We've had a very interesting discussion, and he's told me a load of stuff. I'm not going to reveal who that is because this individual doesn't want me to. But from time to time, we do get approaches like this, and we have to honour these people's request to stay out of the limelight. But you know, there could be more to reveal on that front in the future, let's just say.
Yeah, and maybe we should talk on that thread, and I'm not saying it's this person, by the way, but there is two other points, very important points, I think, that need to be understood about this McCartney thing that came from inside sources, people within the industry that reached out to Mark and I. And one of them has to do with, and I've mentioned this on shows before, but it has to do with the battle that Bill was having with Michael Jackson at first, and then with Sony with regard to the song rights. And it was explained to me that by a person within the music industry that understands this. This is not something that they were pulling, out of their rear end. This is something that they clearly understand. Is that what Bill was doing when he was having that bidding war with Michael Jackson, and then the wrangling, the legal wrangling with Sony, was he wanted a piece of the publisher's action, the publisher's royalties. And the reason is because he was not and is not the songwriter, so he does not have he's not being paid the royalties as the owner of the songs, the owner of the copyright from the original biological Paul song. So as an example, he's not receiving any ownership royalties for songs like Yesterday, Eleanor Rigby, Paperback Writer, all of those songs that everybody knows from Revolver Back. So in order for him to get a piece of the action when he plays those songs in concert, as an example, he has to negotiate with the publisher to see if the publisher will relinquish a piece of their action and flow it to him. And the argument that Bill made was that, hey, this is a no-brainer because it's win-win. If you give me a piece of the action, when I go on tour, I'll roll out and play a bunch of these biological Paul songs. I make money, you make money. So what do you say that we come together and we come to an agreement? And eventually he did come to an agreement with Sony. It's confidential. Nobody will know the terms of that, but it was explained to me that that is what was going on. So this whole thing where, he was, again, bidding with Michael Jackson and then having these debates and wrangling with Sony, that's what it was about. So that says that he is not the guy that wrote the songs from 1966 back. Right. The other thing that was explained to me by somebody within the music industry is that the fact that Memoirs has the lyrics in the book, it was explained to me that in order to be able to do that, in order for Tom to include those lyrics in the book, he had to get permission by the owner of those songs, the owner of the copyrights, in order to be able to put the lyrics in. I was told that nobody, or most people, I guess people who are accomplished, are going to allow their lyrics to be placed in a book or any place else unless they give permission, because they want to first understand in what context are those lyrics going to be used, what kind of light is going to be shed on the lyrics, and also the artist. The artist wants to make sure that they're not being trashed or put in a bad light. So it has to be explained by the person that wants to use the lyrics in the book what it is they're going to do with the lyrics, how it's going to be applied, what context. And then if the songwriter agrees, then they grant permission to use the lyrics. If the songwriter does not agree and says, no, you're not going to use my lyrics, then guess what? The lyrics are not in the book. So that says that in order for Tom to be able to use the lyrics of whether it be the biological Paul songs or the Bill songs, permission had to be granted. So that's another, in my view, that's another proof point, another point of validation that says that the person that is claiming to be the person playing Paul McCartney had to get permission for Tom to use the lyrics. So that means that he's involved in this book, and he's involved in the disclosure.
So just remind me, the lyrics that we get in the book, do they date back to pre-66, like original Paul era, or are they only from the period where Bill would have stepped in?
I have to go back and take a look. That's a good question. I should have looked that up before I got on the show here. I remember most of them being the post-Bio Paul period. Like he was talking about a lot of the lyrics in on the White Album, like Obla Di, Obla Da, and stuff like that, right? So, I'll have to go back and take a look at and see if there are any Bio-Paul lyrics in the book.
I know he does go into the song Michelle, and he puts a meaning on that. And that's an original Paul song.
Yep. So that would mean that he would have had to receive permission by whoever is owning the copyrights. I'm going to assume it's probably the estate of biological Paul, or if biological Paul is still alive, which some people believe, then it was him. Know, but in either case, the point being is that for him to use the lyrics, he had to he had to receive permission to do that. You just can't put lyrics in the book.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we seem to have got a lot of McCartney shoved down our throats in recent years. He's really been in the limelight. He's been doing tours, he's still bringing out albums, there's constant press coverage of him, he's getting snapped by paparazzi in the street. He's in the public eye like never before. There's a big photo feature in the current issue of Mojo magazine in the UK. This is a fairly well-known rock music magazine. They've done like an 8 to 10 page feature on him. They sent a journalist out to meet him on 3 separate occasions, and they've pieced together this overview of his life at this stage, and there's a whole load of pictures in it. There's one of him working out at home. He's exercising at the age of whatever he is, 81 or
81.
whatever. Yeah. So this kind of reinforces the idea that he's trying to keep himself alive to the age of 90. It's really important for him to be around then. So he's working out and stuff and, keeping fit, taking care of his body. But it's almost to reinforce to the public that, look, here's Paul, it's the same guy you've always had. Here he is still doing his thing. And aren't all these conspiracy theories about his replacement ridiculous? Here he is, look. It's like we're getting this rammed down our throats the whole time. He did that show with James Corden, the carpool karaoke thing, just recently, where he went back to supposedly his original childhood home in Liverpool and played a gig in a pub and all this kind of thing. So they're just ramping up the PR on this guy big time, which is quite incredible for, well, if you believe it's Bill and he was born in 1937, then he's 81, or if you think it's the original Paul, then he's 76. Either way, it's an old guy.
Yeah, and I believe the reason why he really is doing a lot of TV and magazines and stuff like that is because this year we have the 9918 is the triple nines. He's 81. 8 plus 1 is 9. So, as I said, and for some people, they just think this is goofy stuff, but the numbers, the numerology is very, very important. So I believe he's looking at it, it's like the planets have aligned, and so this time is right for him to go out and to do all of those appearances. And it's very interesting, Mark. It was explained to me that what they're actually doing is they are putting Bill out there. Well, Bill's putting himself out there, I should say, because Bill, by the way, folks, I don't believe that Bill is a 33rd degree Mason. I believe that he is now in the illuminated degrees. And so he's very high up the ladder of the Freemason pyramid of power. And it's separating the wheat from the chaff. This is how it was explained to me. And for the profane, for those that are asleep and not awake, they will continue to rejoice and believe that this is biological Paul. So they will continue to be in the play, part of the theater production, and that's fine. And that's how they define the profane. I mean, that's what they do. They just basically don't go any deeper than the topical or the superficial, the veneer that's being presented in front of them. But there's another piece of it where they are putting it out there, communicating out to the masses that he's not Paul McCartney. And that's for those that they're trying to awaken, and they consider that to be the process of enlightenment.
Well, for those with the eyes to see, there has been more than enough information now for you to come to this conclusion. It's not as if they've been stingy with the clues.
Exactly. And so we can make an argument, or I can make an argument, that it's not all bad. Some people look at this as just, horrendous. what's gone on here, all the lies and the deception. And I agree. Look, I believe there's better ways to do this than all the lies and deception. But if you look at it from the perspective of how Freemasonry looks at and how they conduct their ideology, their belief system, their religion, it's all about duality, and it's all about becoming illuminated and enlightened, leaving the arena of the profane and moving up, ascending, if you will. So as you said, Mark, they're playing both angles of it. If you're profane and you want to believe the story, the fairy tale that has been presented and is continued to be presented, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's where you're going to be. You're going to continue to sit in the land of the profane. However, if you are picking up on these things and you are looking into it and you're trying to understand it and you're doing research and you're having revelations and epiphanies, they look at that as a good thing. They look at it as separating, as I said before, the wheat from the chaff. And this is how they roll. I'm not saying, folks, it's good or bad. I'm just saying, I'm explaining to you how they view it, what they're doing. And that's what they're doing. That's what Bill's doing.
Well, that's a very interesting way of looking at it. They got both bases covered. And I know Michael Joseph would love that one because he's all about profane, the profanities. What do you make of McCartney's new single? You've heard that, right? I Just Wanna Fuh You.
It's horrible.
F-U-H.
Yeah.
I can't see it getting a lot of radio play. And it's very morally debased in its subject matter. And you might expect better from somebody of 76 or 81 years of age in terms of a message. So he's saying, I just want to fuh you. He'll be lucky at his age.
Yeah. I listened to the song. And to be honest with you, Bill, if you're listening to this, with all due respect, because I'm one of these people that believe that you are very talented and you've written a lot of great songs from 1967 on. It's extremely disappointing, Mark. I thought the same thing. I thought, you're 81 years old. Why are you coming out with that song? Now, is there some kind of occulted meaning behind it? Probably, because that's what he's all about. But I thought to myself, it was probably a better way, a better song.
I just want to change your colostomy bag or something like that at his age.
I was very disappointed. I listened to it and I just kind of shook my head. And I thought, really? That's the best you can come up with? That's the single? So, I
think he's going with what sells, what's in vogue. And this is the sort of thing that Katy Perry or Lady Gaga or one of these stupid pop puppets they've got today would come out with. Pop music has been morally debased, and this is the kind of stuff that kids like. And he's making records with Rihanna and Kanye West and people like that. He just seems to be trying to endear himself to a younger generation who don't really know who he is, but if he makes songs like this, they're going to dig it.
And the thing is, he's going to make that song and nobody's going to dig it because it's not a good song, and their focus is not on an 81-year-old Bill Shepherd, and so perhaps I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Bill has gotten to the point where he doesn't see where he is as far as his life goes. In other words, he is 81 years old, and maybe there should be a different way of doing things instead of doing the stuff that he's doing. Even that stuff like what's that guy's name? Jim Corrigan? Is that what you said his name was?
Oh, James Corden.
James Corden. Yeah, I'm sorry. I really didn't know this guy before I watched that video.
No, you're not missing much.
Even that was. I thought to myself, why are you doing that?
Oh, by the way, James Corden is an MBE. He got his knighthood recently.
Yeah, of course. So they're all in the club, and but I was watching that, and I thought, Bill, why are you doing that? What's happening is you keep doing stuff like that. It's looking goofier and goofier. You're becoming a caricature. You're tainting your true musical abilities when you come out with the single that you and I just talked about. You're better than that. That's how I kind of look at it. And so, again, the whole thing to me is become kind of a joke. And I really wish that he wouldn't go about it that way. My personal view.
Well, you know, when he put out that song with Kanye West a couple of years ago, all the kids that were into Kanye didn't know who Paul McCartney was. And there were comments appearing on chat threads and stuff, and people were saying, that's what I like about Kanye, man. He's always given a platform to up-and-coming artists. and people are saying, who's this Paul McCartney cat? Is he new on the scene? Never heard of him before. Yeah. That's, you know, there's kids who have no idea of the Beatles' heritage and who this guy is, and he just seems to be trying to endear himself to this generation, as if to say, hey, look at me, I'm making records with Kanye, I'm cool.
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And that's, you know, and like I said, I do all the research and present this stuff, but at the end of the day, I have a tremendous amount of respect for his skills and his expertise as a musician. There's no question the man is very talented. So when I see this stuff, it is embarrassing, and I feel embarrassed for him. And if I had a conversation with him, which will never happen, but if I did, I would say, you know, maybe there's a different way to kind of glide out of this thing. You know, you are reaching the end of the runway, and this is probably not the best approach, Bill. You know, go out with some class is basically what I'm saying. Go out in a classy way. Don't come out with songs like I just want to f you. I mean, give me a
He's going to have had no time to live any kind of life for himself. Because, you know, if he was making records as Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots in 1960 or whatever, he was barely 20 then, or early 20s. And if he's going to see this thing through to whenever he exits this reality, you know, he spent his entire life, his entire adult life, just playing roles with no time to just be Bill and relax and chill and do whatever he wants to do. You know, he can look in the mirror. He doesn't even see himself. He sees a plastic surgery representation of somebody a part that he's playing. Like he has a permanent mask on his face, and he has that permanent mask on his face for, you know, his whole life. And I can't imagine how that can be. And no matter how much he wants to say what a good life it's been, and he can't believe that all this has happened to him, and all the fame and the fortune and all that stuff, that's great, you know. But what life would you have had if you didn't do that? You say, well, I wouldn't have had all the money. Yeah, okay, maybe you wouldn't have had all the money, but there was a whole nother life out there that you were born into that you should have experienced, and you didn't. You didn't. You know, you were always in the land of make believe. You were in the land of pretend. You were, as you say, Mark, a lifetime actor. And I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want that. If somebody said to me, "We're going to give you all this money, but you have to have all this plastic surgery, and you got to play this part, and you got to do it for the rest of your life," I would have said, "You know what? It's not worth it.
It's not worth it. I'm not going to do it." But he decided to do it.
Yeah. In that Mojo magazine feature, he's getting vaguely spiritual in some of the stuff he's talking about. He says that, you know, when we leave this life, we go on to a much better existence. So there's that quote in there. He's thinking about what lies next for him. You know, he's getting reflective like that.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, his biggest issue is, and I did converse with Tom a little bit on this. It was through some Facebook comments. He is in a position where nobody knows who Bill Shepherd is. He's written all these great songs, from Sgt. Pepper on, through his Wings period, his solo period. I mean, he has written great songs, folks. For those that want to be adamant and say he hasn't, and it wasn't as good as Paul's songs, look, you can't say that songs like Maybe I'm Amazed, Band on the Run, Live and Let Die, I mean, we can go right down a whole list of songs. I mean, he's written great songs. Yeah. But nobody knows that Bill Shepherd wrote those songs. Nobody knows who the hell Bill Shepherd is. And that's got to be very, very taxing on him right now. And that's why I think the whole disclosure process is underway, Mark. It's because I think by the time he passes away, he wants to have at least some level of understanding out there that he was the guy. It was William Wallace Shepherd that wrote these songs, not a guy named Paul McCartney, because Paul McCartney, as you said, he's just a part that people are playing. And it's really sad in a way. It really is. I wouldn't want to be in his position, regardless of how much fame and fortune was involved. If I did something and I was doing something that I felt was contributing to the world with great music and everything else, I'd want people to know that Mike Williams wrote those songs. Not some alias, not some AKA. I mean, that's, I don't know. Right. I think it's weird.
I'm going on a road trip in a couple of weeks to Scotland because I absolutely adore Scotland. That's something he and I have in common. I love Scotland. Any opportunity to get back up there. You know where I'm going?
Where are you going?
Mull of Kintyre.
Okay, there you go.
I've never been there. It's a peninsula. It's a right bastard to get to by road. Yeah. You have to really go around the houses to get down there. But I'm just going to spend 2 or 3 days going down to the Mull of Kintyre, down to Campbelltown, and taking a look at the place and seeing if I get inspired. Really looking forward to that one. I went to Alistair Crowley's old hangout, Boleskine House on Loch Ness a couple of years ago. Did a road trip up there. So, treading in the footsteps of Paul/Billy on that one.
Well, and that's the thing, that's the other thing that Billy's done is he's left clues in his songs, and Mull of Kintyre is a huge clue. Why would somebody
going back to a place that he loves?
Exactly. So if you were British, why would you write a song, an ode to Scotland?
If you grew up on a council estate in Liverpool.
Exactly. You wouldn't do that. So, and that's why he moved to Scotland and that's where he raised his family. So those are all clues too. But people just ignore that stuff or they just don't even know about it.
Right. Okay, so we're pretty much done here, I think. We're just wrapping up. Let me just ask you, do you hope to gracefully slip aside from McCartney research, given that you are into so many other things, you've got so many other irons in the fire, or do you think now you've become that guy, the go-to guy on all this, and you're kind of stuck with this now to the bitter end?
I think to a degree I'm probably stuck with it a little bit. It's kind of weird, there's like I mentioned, there have been people that have reached out to me, and there are a lot of people. When I say reached out to me, I mean sources that have reached out to me. But there are also many people who are very, very interested in this, listeners and people who follow the YouTube channel and so on, my Facebook friends and so on. So what I have said is that I'm going to try to kind of wind it down a little bit. Because unless there's more revelations, and I mean significant revelations, I'm not going to just kick around and rehash what I've already talked about in many shows. But if new revelations come forth, I will step up and present them. I will do that. Now, I don't know, where I'm going to be in 2027. That's 9 years from now. I'll be almost 70 years old. So I can't make any promises.
Oh, you're a mere whippersnapper by Billy's standards.
So the answer is, Mark, I'm going to try to, keep my head in the game as much as I possibly can. But like you said, there's a lot of other stuff that I get involved in. And so I don't want this to be my, to consume all of my alternative research time and energy. That's not going to happen. In fact, I'm going to say that's not going to happen. But I do feel a kind of a weird sense of obligation to kind of stay with it or stick with it as much as I can.
Yep. Well, you could go down in history as the guy that cracked all this. So we're just a few days now from 999, the 9th of the 9th, 18. How are you going to feel if nothing earth-shattering comes out of the McCartney camp on that day? Or would you take it that the Egypt Station album release is the thing that we were waiting for?
Yeah, it was the album. And it is the tour that was announced to follow up the album. It will be the revision of 2 memoirs, so the memoirs will be revised. Now, whether Tom will be able to get that out exactly on 9/9, I don't know. He did tell me he was under the gun, to get that cranked out. But like I said, whether that's actually going to happen on September 9th, I don't know. So that will happen, and then we're going to see the consolidation of Bill's websites. That's going to happen after September 9th, though, because of delays, project plan delays. But so I feel good that those 4 things are representative of being involved in that 999 parameter. So
well, yeah,
those are the things that we should expect. Those 4 things.
And if we sit around waiting for the 9th of the 9th, 2027, and nothing happens, we'll be really pissed off. Or what's going to happen if Bill passes away before then? If the plan is for him to make 90, but he doesn't, goes under a bus or something, that's really going to scupper things, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that, because when I was told that they're trying to hustle along, speed up the disclosure a little bit, I thought, well, why? Is it because you just feel like the original project plan didn't have as much of an impact as they thought it was, and so the original project plan is behind? Or is it because, no, the project plan is chugging along the way it's supposed to be, but maybe Bill ain't going to make it, so they want to kind of speed things along? So it's either, in my view, it's one of those two. But I did find that interesting that they're looking to quicken the pace a little bit, and they are trying to do that. I was told that.
Yeah, keep doing your workouts, Bill.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to the show that you mentioned with Michael Joseph, taking apart the symbolism of the album, Egypt Station. Yeah. And you and I did a show with Michael just recently, which will be released in a few days, where we got into all kinds of stuff. Elephants in the room, basically.
That was a great show.
It really was. In terms of your own shows, just remind people where they can go to find the rest of your work.
Yeah, all you need to do is go to my hub website. It's Sage of Quay, SAGEOFQUAY.com, and right there you'll find links to all of my platforms. That's best place to land to go find my work. This is just for
Vibrations, I'm picking up vibrations, I'm picking up vibrations, I'm picking up